Hi, welcome back. My name's Chris and I teach French at OuiCommunicate, a school that I started in 2018, and we specialise in teaching French to adult learners. In this video I'll be talking about the notion of kinetic chain to best learn French, which is a notion that I invented. And what I'm actually doing in this video, I'm repurposing a blog post, an article that I wrote for my website that was called Learn French to Get Out of America, something similar, because regardless of personal views on politics, I've met several students who formulated the wish to, quote unquote, get out of America, to go to France. So for this purpose, they started to learn French so as to be able to fit in overseas. So I didn't want to make anything too political, so I rather gave this video the title Kinetic Chain to learn French. So in this video I'll share with you some of my experience to hopefully guide you towards what you would have to do in order to learn French, and I hope this advice serves you well. So here we are at step 1. You want to learn French, but you're not quite sure what that entails. As a very first step, I would advise more caution than is usually provided by apps or language schools. Firstly, you the learner must understand that you're likely stepping into a field in which you have no prior reference. You have very few references in the field of language learning, and this puts you in a weakened position and vulnerable to any type of learning method that promises you French in the shortest amount of time. The implicit or sometimes explicit promise of most apps or sometimes even language schools is do this and French will happen, but very rarely is this the case, if ever. The issue is, if you don't properly understand what it means to learn an academic subject, the action of learning, it will likely not work as well. And if you can't properly define the other half of it, the language, what it means, what a language actually means, you'll likely not understand what you're expected to do. When we purchase the services of a source of learning, whether they're online, in person, schools, tutors, apps, we delegate this responsibility to them and believe that our part of the bargain is to show up. We think that the language specialists have it all sorted out and that our involvement can be minimal, but it isn't so. This brings us to step number 2. You likely go out and find the biggest name to teach you French. Many learners, I've noticed, skip step 1 altogether, and even though they might realize that they're not able to define a language or the act of learning one, they'll assume that if they find a big name in that business, in that industry, the rest will take care of itself. And this is often the very biggest mistake you could actually make, because in truth it falls entirely within your responsibility to examine yourself and your ambitions and ask yourself, well, what do I want to achieve? What am I ready to give in order to get there? And am I ready to face the truth that learning French takes focus, sacrifice and repetition? Maybe not sacrifice, but certainly focus and repetition. As a next step, I think that a critical examination of your source of learning should be at the top of your priorities before even signing up. Questions should include, ideally, what are the odds that they're able to control quality if they offer upwards of 20 languages? Seriously, what are the odds? What is the true intention of the owners of the school if they seem to grow to international proportions? Are the tutors involved at all in the creative process, or are they just a cog in a huge machine? I think we have to understand that some types of businesses can grow in size without sacrificing quality, but this is not a rule that all businesses can follow, right? So for example, supermarkets or taxi companies, I would imagine that more is in direct correlation to quality. You want a supermarket that can offer more because you have more choice, they can buy in bulk, the prices go down, so it's better to have a large supermarket than a little corner store, right? So here there's a direct correlation. Same with a taxi company. It's better to work with a taxi company that has 300 taxis than one who just has 3 taxis, right, for availability and many other reasons besides. But this principle doesn't apply to all industries, of which language learning. Just think of this, a sports team with 10 coaches, it's absurd, but a sports team with 10 coaches instead of 1 will not perform better. An ice cream van that sells 200 flavors instead of 20 is not better for the customer. The lines might be longer, your experience will not be that much better just because they have 200 types of ice cream in the van. The ice cream guy might not know all the 200 types of flavor. It's not always that much better to be big. And same for a barber who might have room for 300 customers, 300 seats in the local barber shop will not cut your hair better than if they had just 3 seats. So these absurd examples show that quality control in certain industries suffer more than in others when they grow past a certain size. So placing too much trust in the size and reputation of your source of learning while at the same time overlooking your side of the bargain will likely get you a comfortable seat in the wagon but won't tell you what time the train arrives, which means when will I know French? So the day you get impatient and stand up to complain, you'll likely realise that you were supposed to be shoveling coal in the engine and determining for yourself at what time the train would arrive. Which brings us to step 3, you trust the process. Once a learner's comfortably seated in that big name language school or playing with an app, they trust the process and wait for French to happen. And if all goes well, they will soon be at that level where they can order their own bread in France. But the fact is, at this late stage in the process, several weeks in, the student still hasn't examined the very notion of learning, what it means to learn, or the notion of language. How do you define a language? What is it? So the learning part seems to be well organized by the other party, whoever's teaching you that language, while the language part seems to have little importance precisely because it's taken care of by the learning structure. And this is the part where I'm about to get practical. If indeed your plan is to prepare seriously to move to France, I think it's a good idea to measure the mountain you're about to climb. Am I making it harder for myself by not being properly equipped? Knowing a new language is both, I feel, in my opinion, I think it's both complex and easy at once. It's complex so long as we skip the necessary reflection on the nature of learning and the reflection on the nature of a language. What is a language and what does it mean to learn one? In short, what's going to happen factually between me not knowing French and me knowing French? When will I know that I know French? What is even French? I feel that going with a source of learning that promises to simplify this to the extreme is like choosing a Sherpa that says, don't worry about what it means to climb a mountain, we'll get you up there, it will be easy. Frankly, very unlikely. The secret formula that will help you learn French sooner than later isn't usually mentioned by anyone because it takes repetition, discipline, curiosity, structure, and a sense of marvel. These 5, and I'll repeat them. Repetition, discipline, curiosity, structure, and a sense of marvel. These 5 elements function as a sort of kinetic chain where each part drives the next. The repetition side of things is often downplayed. For example, when you sign up for classes or you find yourself an app, they usually mention a variety and a constant change in experience. They sell you volume. It's always different, many resources. They'll never say that you have to repeat it until you know it. So it is indeed contrary to a pleasurable customer experience. But interestingly, we can all check for ourselves the universal principle by which any human who ever became good at anything did so by repeated exposure. Now, forcing ourselves to engage in repetition, of course, takes discipline, but the two can be made easier by a sense of marvel. You see, we have 3 elements working together, and by a sense of curiosity for French, 4 things working together. This is the kinetic chain. So 2 disagreeable parts, 2 hard parts give birth to pleasure, which can then be reused to fuel the cycle, and this is the kinetic chain. To finish this video, I'll give you a very practical example of what I mean by the kinetic chain. A practical example would be, for example, forcing yourself to learn a certain French tense. You'll have to repeat this until you know it. It takes discipline, you have to repeat it until you know it, but it gives birth to a sense of marvel because you have now learnt it. That's your victory, you see. This, in turn, fuels your curiosity. It's a 4th element to discover more. And the whole experience is made easier still because you're operating within a structure which helps you know precisely what you are learning. And I mentioned structure at the beginning of this video, what it means to learn, what it means, what does a language mean. That's the structure I'm referring to. As counterintuitive as it may seem, this likely works a lot better than methods that emphasize fun or minimal involvement from the student. Because remember, you're driving the train, you're not just sitting on the train, okay? Thank you very much for watching. My name is Chris from OuiCommunicate. Goodbye. I want to add a few words that I'm going to ad-lib following this video about this kinetic chain method, which really isn't a thing, obviously. It's not a linguistic principle at all. It's just a name I gave to it. But I genuinely rack my brains day and night to think about the best methods to learn French, the best way I can teach it. And I found a few qualities that I see in students who perform better than others, and there's a number of qualities, and there's a number of things that you can put together, and I've come to the number of 5, but there may be others. And it's like the reason I'm mentioning kinetic chain, because each element enforces the next. When I mentioned in the beginning of this video, and I realize I might not have been very clear, when I mentioned structure, what it means to learn and what a language means, I'm not at all splitting hairs. I'm not at all looking too far into it, because if you're going to, and I compared it in my video to a mountain, right? You find yourself a Sherpa who says, don't worry, you don't need to worry about mountain climbing. You don't even need to think about it. We'll get you to the top. Well, of course it won't work. It's a universal principle of life. So as a learner, your very first step, there are several first steps even before taking your first lesson, even before doing anything. I've not mentioned all of them, but at the very least, you need to find yourself a sense of structure before learning a language. What does it mean to learn a language? What is this act of learning a language? We don't mention it very often because it doesn't sell very well. And you have to understand what we mean by a language. What is a language? What is this thing we call French? Is it just a notion of foreign words that make strange sounds, or is there some sort of structure to it? So this is the starting point to the kinetic circle. You need structure, you need to understand what you're doing. And my best students understood what they were doing. It's necessary, and it's very achievable also. Now, as a second step, you need to have discipline. But it's a lot easier to have discipline if you know where you're going. Right? Because now you have a structure, you understand what needs to be done, you understand what it means to learn a language. And I agree that it's hard to know before you've done the thing, but you can put chances on your side and at least dedicate some time to talk with your teacher about what it means to learn a language and what a language is. And of course, when you've achieved French, you'll have a better definition, a better working definition, and you'll have even more structure. You will be able to define French better than someone who's not yet learned it, obviously. So structure as a first step enforces discipline. It makes discipline a lot easier because it's no longer a chaotic thing. Like a lot of these apps, a lot of these websites, have you noticed? It's limitless. It's the limitless experience. It's not some French, it's all the French. We have videos, we have games, we have quizzes, we have everything. We have interviews with French people, we have food, everything. Order coffee in French, tie your shoelaces in French, anything. They have it all, but it's too much. There's no structure. So it's very hard to be disciplined if you don't have structure, because you're going to have to be disciplined. Believe me, academic learning, a language is an academic thing. We're downplaying the thing as if, oh, language learning, that's so easy. It's impressive, you know, to know a language, a second or a third language. If you knew someone who knew 4 languages, you'd say, I have a mate who speaks 4 languages. It's an impressive thing, but so why do we downplay it and think it will just happen by accident? Or just play around with an app and it will happen? Of course it won't. That's just marketing. So structure, discipline. As a third point, repetition. You are going to have to repeat it. Just look up videos. Look up how do footballers practice? How do tennis champions practice? I found these videos on YouTube which quite surprised me because I don't know much about tennis, but I was surprised to see the two young players and the coach throwing balls at them. 100 times the same throw, 100 times the same backhand or forehand, I think it's called, or smash or volley. They're doing the same thing over and over again. That's how you get good at things. It's a universal principle. You're going to have to repeat it. But it's also very hard to repeat something when there's no structure. Where am I going? You know, you can't repeat Duolingo, can you? Well, they make you repeat it, but there's chaos. A bad example. Too much repetition, leading nowhere. So structure enforces discipline, and it makes it easier when you can be disciplined, because you're going to have to be disciplined to repeat. So because now you're working within a nice structure, you can discipline yourself to repeat. This is how we learn, you know. Repetition is the mother of all learning. It's a timeless principle. Everything works that way, right? So the fourth step is a sense of marvel. I always say that there are people who have a natural sense of marvel. They have a sense of marvel, and it makes them better learners. So the next step is, well, sorry, I'm not particularly marvelled by the French language, which is, I'll accept, of course, but then you can ask yourself, well, what can I do to make this happen? What can I do to create this sense of marvel? Because we do well the things that we enjoy, so you need to have little victories somehow. Marvel will happen when you have a victory, so you force yourself to learn something new in French, and all of a sudden you have this sense of marvel. You say, well, I can do it, I understand how it works, it's fantastic. And when you have that sense of marvel, then it's easier to encourage your sense of curiosity, and that's the fifth step. And then your curiosity, we go back to structure, right? It's easy, you're curious, and you're going back to that structure in when you work, in which you learn, and each point reinforces the next in the kinetic circle. But it would be very hard to remain curious about French if you weren't working within a structure. Imagine the most chaotic course you can imagine. It's okay, well, where are we going with this thing? There's no structure. I find it very hard to remain curious and to celebrate my victories if I don't know where I'm going. And you'd be surprised that the leaders of the online teaching platforms, it's chaos. It's often very, very bad. So it's hard to discipline yourself also, because you don't quite know where you're going. You don't know that what structure you can find within this learning platform. Or even, I shouldn't forget, schools. Schools are often very, very chaotic also, and very badly organized. Discipline, repetition, sense of marvel, curiosity, and structure. These are the things I feel work together well to bring you to a higher level of French. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Chris from OuiCommunicate. See you soon. Bye.